¿Qué tal? I'm Antonio Tijerino, host of the Fritanga podcast by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. On today's episode, we're joined by a visionary advocate for environmental justice in our community, mi hermano, Mark Magaña. As founding president and CEO of GreenLatinos, Mark has led the charge against climate change's disproportionate and lasting impact on our community since 2012. Whether it's heat waves in Texas, droughts in California, rising sea levels in Florida, or hurricanes in Puerto Rico, Latinos throughout the United States and beyond are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. But across our country, Latin America, and our globe, Nuestra Comunidad is organizing, resisting, and fighting back in spite of the irreversible damage to this planet. Despite the environmental and political challenges, my man Mark will never back down.
We right now are the first generation to see the worst effects of the climate crisis, and we're the last generation to be able to do anything about it. We have to be the generation that did what every generation before us did. They sacrificed so that we could have a better life. And if we're not willing to sacrifice some of our safety, some of our time, to be able to sacrifice for our kids and our grandkids, then we're failing our ancestors.
Through the establishment of GreenLatinos, he chooses to ignite hope by nurturing and cultivating a robust national network of Latino environmental and conservation advocates, a community designed to foster collaboration and collective action. In extending his challenge to our community, he calls upon us all to join La Lucha for environmental liberation. On this pod, we'll get to hear more about Mark's personal journey, what GreenLatinos has planned, and explore the role of climate change and environmental racism now and going forward. We'll also take a look at what's happening in the environmental policy space and what needs to happen, including in immigration, which is being affected by climate change. I am thrilled to share Mark Magaña's inspiring story and transformative work with you on this special Madre Tierra episode. Prepare to be inspired. Now let's fritanga. All right, my man Mark Magaña, the Green Latino himself. Been in this lucha a long time, brother. I have appreciated your presence in this critical space for our community for many, many years. In fact, 93% of all Latinos say protecting the quality of the environment for future generations is very or somewhat important to them when thinking about proposals to reduce the effects of global climate change. Mark, I've been hearing you over the years as you talk about how climate change and other environmental issues left unchecked will impact systematic social, health, and economic injustices. So tell us about GreenLatinos, which you founded 12 years ago. What led you to start the organization? What gap within environmental advocacy were you aiming to fill at the time? And the role of Latinos you saw in filling the gap as well, and the gap on this issue within our community.
Well, thank you, Antonio, and I appreciate the work that you do, the leadership that you have conveyed. I have followed you and will follow you to the ends of the earth as you take on the biggest issues that affect the Latino community globally and in this country, from the borders to, I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud that of your bravery and your spirit to be able to bring more of us along to make sure that our community's leadership is heard where it needs to be heard. So number one, thank you.
Well, in this space, I follow you, brother.
Oh, I appreciate that. Number two, I already forgot your question, so I'm going to answer the question I want to answer.
That's what you would have done anyway.
I'm just giving you the excuse as to why. All right, so GreenLatinos. So we started as we changed our name to GreenLatinos about 12 years ago, but we started 16 years ago now. Last year, we had our quinceañera, and it was a wonderful experience with a cake and the dresses and the chambelán and todo. It was a lot of fun. And what we started was as an effort to help move a national climate legislation. And what we saw was that Latinos who were in the movement didn't feel connected, that they felt isolated and siloed where they worked, and that our community never works in a disconnected fashion. Our community works together, comadres, compadres in a community together, the fight. We don't do it alone. We're not solo actors. And so even when it comes to policy work or advocacy work or organizing, none of that stuff we do alone. We have to do it together. So being able to have a national network of Latino, Latina, Latina, environmental, conservation, climate justice advocates who come together from across different sectors of the movement to be able to convene, to know each other, to build relationships, whether it's in person or virtually, that will hopefully break down historical barriers that exist between these sectors, but also help us to be able to share our resources, our power, our privilege, our access, and really work as a network, work together, because we all have needs. We all, everyone, the more people we meet, the more people we know with different types of resources and access. And so being able to support each other, to be able to exclaim, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who works on soil erosion or ocean acidification or methane power plants. There are more people that look like us and talk like us and play like us that do the same work, and we can support each other. So that's the base of who we are and why we came to be, is to be able to be that network, be that comunidad.
So what has evolved since then, though? I know you did the part about gathering community members that are involved in this issue to make sure that we're connected for all the reasons you just articulated. Yeah. But what's happened since then? How have you evolved as an organization? Because I see you doing a lot more.
Yeah. 2 big points where we have evolved. Number 1, let's say, is convening. Number 2 is playing the intermediary resource provider. There have been, in the last 10 years, promises of the sun and the moon for frontline environmental justice. But maybe only the biggest dozen and a half EJ groups in the U.S. are well known by the funders, by the big green groups, by the corporations. And so they do well, and they do amazing work. But for every one of them, there's 100 frontline comadres, a priest and a teacher trying to stop a school from being placed on a toxic waste site, trying to electrify buses, trying to clean up a river, trying to shut down a methane peaker plant. And they are under-resourced. They don't have the support. And so they come to us and oftentimes come to us and say, I need a fiscal sponsor so I can raise money. I need some government relations help, some comms help. And so our intermediary work is to get resources and know who's out there that has the resources and connect them to the organizations, entities, campaigns that have less access. Because that money, that support can be used. What they can do with $1 relative to $100 is amazing. And so our ability to be able to make those linkages. Then finally, when you're doing the member-to-member support and the direct support from GreenLatinos with who has the resources and who needs them, then more and more entities are resourced to do their work, their programmatic work, but they're also resourced and hopefully supported to do advocacy work on the issues that they care about. And so we do advocacy training, fly-ins at the state and the federal level, because you learn how to advocate with elected and appointed members and officials, and then you go home and you teach someone else. You say, I can do this. I know what it takes. So I go and I can do my mayor. I can do my city council. I know what it means to be able to advocate and have the power and the knowledge and the information, because GreenLatinos puts out a lot of research to be able to specifically to follow for advocacy. And so I'd say those 2 are our next biggest things. Resources through, and we have our own fund. I'll pitch it right now, Justicia en Equidad Fund.
There you go.
It's an intermediary fund. We get resources from funders, and we get them out in smaller chunks out to the community. And so being able to play those 2 roles, we really see in our theory of action as what's going to change the system.
And that's how to do it, Mark. You have to believe in the people that are on the front lines doing this kind of work. And they are under-resourced, and they get trickled down drops. So for you to be able to create that funnel over to them, as well as how to access additional funding, which a lot of times you have to know what you don't know in terms of being able to go to certain institutions or government agencies and get some of the guidance. Mark, what excited me about doing this podcast, besides this podcast is called Fritanga, and our goal is to not only bring information, was also figuring inspiration, out perspective, on the spot, connection, and action, which you brought Green Latinos strong. And I'll talk about it in a minute because to our listeners, notes, but I want to make sure that, but also to create a space to help them find comfort and community with you, our culture, because of the infrastructure we have in place that should feed you. So please go ahead if you had another thing to add.
Thank you. And youth is important, so I can't wait for that conversation as well. You mentioned government funding, and you mentioned access to funding. One of our programs is called Colaborativo 40, and it really was in response to the Justice 40 initiative by the Biden administration that 40% of federal funds should go to support and benefit these disadvantaged communities that we live in. You made the point of our community getting money trickled down in drips and drabs. We don't want, in the end of the day, when all this money is dispersed on the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, we don't want to analyze it and say, okay, we got drips and drabs. We want to know that the money went to our community, it went to our leaders, it served our community, and we directed the money ourselves. Instead of just benefited from it, we directed it. And so that's a key part, is being able to make sure that we have access to federal funds. And it's difficult. Tony, for the first time, we became a federal fundee. And it was difficult. And I did it because I've been advocating for others to become primary federal government applicants. And I felt like I can't advocate if I haven't done it myself. And so that's key, is to be able to have the knowledge, to be able to pass on to others, to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it together. And it can be, you don't have to be a primary. You could be a sub applicant with an experienced primary.
That's right.
And you can, so there's many ways to do it, but we got to get into it. We got to do it. This is the biggest wealth building and economy-wide change that we're going to experience in our lifetime, is the change, the evolution into the green economy. And so if we're not on the front lines of it, then we're on the table.
And that's the importance of representation, to make sure when those decisions are being made, that someone like Mark Magaña is in a position to distribute those funds or educate those that are trying to access those funds in a culturally relevant way. And so the importance of representation in some of these government agencies is critical, or in these philanthropic organizations and shout out Hispanics in philanthropy. And it's important to connect all of these different pieces, because like you said, it takes a collective effort. As Latinos, we're no good on our own. I certainly am not. When I'm home alone by myself, I'm like, somebody come hang out with my kids. The other day were like, quit moping around, call Marco Davis and go hang out with him. And it's the truth. We're better together. So let me ask you a question, though, because it's interesting, spanning across different administrations. You started during the Obama administration. Can you talk about the difference from the Obama administration to doing this work now with the Biden administration in 2024? Have you seen progress? And what is that progress that you've seen in environmental policy and in advocacy and activism within the Latino community? So one is within these agencies, within these administrations, and the other is within the Latino community.
I think it was during the probably late in the second Obama tenure when the environmental movement started realizing, well, and maybe it started earlier than that. It started when the first effort to pass a climate change bill, cap and trade, Waxman-Markey, failed. And there was a lot of introspection in the environmental movement. Why did it fail? Why didn't we have the base to be able to have the political willpower to pass it. And a lot of people saw that it was because there was really very little inclusion of communities of color into decision making, into, not just at the very end, but that their leadership, indigenous leadership, Black leadership, Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, etc., that leadership hadn't been included in the rooms, in the higher levels. And so when push came to shove, there was no big table that had the power to be able to move this. And so really, the movement saw how weak it was, especially under Trump, and how if you didn't have the front lines ready and resourced to be able to fight Trump, not just at the DC federal level, because that's just playing defense. That's neutral. But to be able to continue to take action and win battles at the city level, at the county level, at the state level, despite what the president does, was key at that moment. And so it really did encourage the environmental movement to say, okay, this is vital for us to be able to win, is to be able to say, we have to take the leadership of indigenous wisdom and Latino wisdom and Black wisdom. And so in the Biden administration, they started off at the very beginning, really emphasizing the importance of environmental justice, saying it, putting out the Justice 40 metric, putting out goals of 30 by 30, being able to conserve 30% of the air, of the land, of the water, of the ocean by 2030, and doing it with our communities taking the lead. All of these things, and making sure that the Justice 40 was essentially making sure that investments were going into our community. And so Biden kicked off his presidency with a lot of these creations. He created the White House Environmental Justice Council with a lot of these, freely using the word environmental justice, supporting these things. And so starting with that basis, empowered, when a president starts with that as their base, it empowers Congress to say, okay, this president's all in. This was within his first week, he did all of this. So we have to push this, and we have an opportunity to use, maybe 1-2 opportunities in Congress, to split Congress, to be able to move billions and billions of dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so that was because of the early message and investment of the Biden presidency, and because of the power of the Congress under Schumer and Pelosi at the time, to be able to really fight to move these dollars, because it was and is a priority. And the last thing I'll say, it was and is a priority, Antonio, because of your main constituency, because of the youth. This is, and you're about to get into it, but the youth, this is their issue. We right now are the first generation to see the worst effects of the climate crisis, and we're the last generation to be able to do anything about it. This is it. After this, we reach a tipping point. And so they know that. It stresses them. It gives them anxiety. And so we need to be there. It's not just on them to take care of. We can't be like, okay, youth, you do this. No. Antonio, we have to be the generation that did what every generation before us did. Our grandparents, our parents, was they sacrificed so that we could have a better life. And if we're not willing to sacrifice some of our safety, some of our time, to be able to sacrifice for our kids and our grandkids, then we're failing our ancestors.
Yeah. We said something interesting too, because it's always been our children, our grandchildren, generations from now, the earth is going to fail them. Now we're at that point. This was always years ago, generations before, when we were young, you would hear that generations from now, this is going to happen. Basically, you have kids, I have kids. It's on them right now. And there's a sense of urgency around this. We're not looking at 200 years from now. We're looking at decades from now. Well, actually, we're seeing it right now. If you're looking at too much water, too many droughts, I mean, it's unbelievable what is happening right at this very moment. And I actually coined the term impatient activism. And I really urge everyone, whether they're our age or whether they're young people like our kids' age, that you have to be more impatient with your activism, because time can't wait. You know, that Earth is deteriorating as we speak right now, and it's not generations from now anymore. It is our kids' generation and their kids. That's it.
Absolutely true. I mean, it is right now. It is this summer and the last summer are going to be the nicest summers you're ever going to experience. It is going to be beastly hot. There will be parts of Central and Latin America and Africa that will be unlivable, inhospitable to human life. And so, because you can't grow anything, because you can no longer sweat because the bulb temperature is too high. And that, the inhumanity of what were the U.S. and China and other industrial leaders are putting the third world countries through right now, with forced migration, with massive deaths and hunger and famine, is unbelievable. And we're not taking any ownership over it.
So, Mark, when we've talked about the government's role when it comes to the environment, we also need to make sure, as you said, that collective effort also includes the private sector, who have just as big of a responsibility. What can corporations do in the simplest terms, and I know it's a complex issue, in order to become a cleaner, greener, and more sustainable company or institution? How can they support Green Latinos also as be able to invest in the work that you're doing and other groups to help them improve? Because Green Latinos can help them improve in terms of their policies and in terms of what they're doing to the environment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Corporations are reading the demands of consumers. They are seeing that consumers want them to be green. And so you are seeing, that's why you're seeing so many ads for oil and gas companies. You know, they're turning their logo green in a flower, and they are talking about their investments in and clean energy and clean this and clean that. And, so they know where the consumers are. They know where the interest is. It's just a matter of actually being green, being clean, worrying about the future, and not just using greenwashing techniques to be able to prove that. So we have to be vigilant about what we believe, about how we spend our money. The message is already out there. You see it. You see the advertisements. You see, organic food. I always laugh because the industry for products that are clean, for that clean your air. I mean, I have air purifiers in my house. I've got water purifiers in my house. I've got humidifiers during the winter. I got dehumidifiers during the summer. The things that I have in my house to be able to combat the environmental degradation, the money I spent.
Yeah.
My grandmother would give me a chancla to the side of the head if I told her what I spent for clean water and clean air and organic food.
Yeah, man.
And I say this often, but Tony, you know what organic food used to be called? It used to be called food.
Brother, you know what? You're hitting on something so much for me right now that I hate that you have to be able to afford to be healthy. The healthier alternative at a grocery store costs more, even if it's from the same part of the same animal, the same plant. If it's healthier, it's going to be more expensive. The healthier foods. There's a gentrification of food. Kale used to be, when I used to do catering in college, that used to be a garnish. That's what you decorated the food with. All of a sudden, it's on NPR that it's a superfood, and then the price goes up. And I actually wrote an article that was the gentrification of food, and I brought out, quinoa and coconut water. My dad used to drink coconut milk and coconut water as a diabetic in Nicaragua. And all of a sudden, that becomes $10 for a can. And my dad has to now drink the cheaper version that's pure sugar because the real one has now been co-opted. And so I'm so with you right now. You are triggering me right now.
Avocado toast, Tony.
You go to like a healthy restaurant and it costs more than the food that you're trying to be alternatively healthy for. And so it should not cost more money. You shouldn't have to be able to afford to be healthy. And I'm with your abuela.
And they knew how to preserve. They knew how to utilize every part of the animal. They knew how to reuse, repurpose. It was pretty amazing what we learned from them, and being able to, my grandmother would save a piece of tape from a Christmas present. And I'd get a birthday card, a recycled birthday card, and it would have a $5 bill taped with used tape into the card, on a used card, and with a used envelope. It was just amazing. And a lot of the times with the Latino community, they don't think of environmentalism because it's like, it's an assumed position. Of course I'm not going to. Can I curse on your show, Antonio?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Of course I'm not going to shit where I eat. I have my ancestors had one-to-one relationships with the land.
Yeah, man.
How the land did, how the air did, how the water did, decided whether they were going to live or die. And so, for us to lose that part of our culture, we are cultural conservationists. We are not organizational conservationists because we're members of an organization. We're cultural conservationists. And so if we lose that part of who we are, we lose a huge chunk of what we were. And that's sad.
You're hitting so many points right now. So let's get to that individual responsibility within our community. I believe there's a public and a private sector. And then I believe that there's an individual sector that you're talking about right now. What can everyday citizens do to create a positive ripple of impact on our earth, including my children and yours? I don't care if it's at a park and you pick something up. You're in a position of privilege that you can pick something up and put it into a garbage can. So what other things do you encourage individuals right now that are listening to this and will listen to it to make an impact, especially year round as Latinos, in having that relationship with our ancestors and with the earth that you just voiced so passionately?
Yeah, I think the things that I already mentioned, which number one would be advocating. Spend the time. Join an organization in your community. Join with other people that are doing this work in your community. Again, we don't do this stuff alone. We do it in community. Convince your city council to take action on the climate crisis, whether that is planting trees, to increased in renewables, solar, wind, reduction in their oil and gas usage. The cities and counties have so much power over the spending, and that establishes whether or not we're going to have another generation of oil and gas infrastructure. If we don't need it, we won't have it. And if we don't have the next generation of oil and gas infrastructure, then we won't be using the oil and gas. We can keep it in the ground. So advocating at every level and finding the people who are working on this, because you're not going at this alone. Using your purchasing power for the right things. Reducing maybe the amount of beef you use. I mean, for us, we used every part of the animal. We use the tongue, the brain, the huesos, the lengua, you've got a taco or a meal that you can find in our community. We can find the whole cow in every part of our meals. You know, it ain't just steak in our house.
Oh.
Menudo. Yeah. So mondongo, huesos, lengua, todo. And these are delicacies. I hope those prices don't go up now. And so for us, it is a matter of using your buying power to say to corporations, I'm not effing around. I'm not going to buy your stuff if you're just going to greenwash me. I am going to get clean energy. I am going to get, clean food. I am going to, invest my money where it counts. And then do the things at home. Don't waste. Live like your grandparents did.
Yeah.
Be smart. They taught us. We know how to do it.
Oh,
it's our instinct.
Yeah, when your shampoo is almost running out and there's just a little bit, put a little water in there and shake it up. I'm being serious. This is how we grew up.
We asked our leaders this question. Secretary Becerra would cut open the toothpaste tube and scrape the rest out.
Me too.
Senator Padilla has a fundraisers at his house, and he'd wash the plasticware at the end of the night so he could use it again.
I wash my plastic bags.
Yes.
After the kids use them for snacks. Down. Yes.
Yes.
So by the way, that's how cool Senator Padilla and Secretary Becerra are, by the way. You talked about two real ones there. Look, I'm going to get back to the youth part because this is the part I'm excited about because I want to be able to do my part supporting Green Latinos. You know that HHF and I are all about pipeline because as amazing as you are, we need more Magañas ready to support and take over the work. And I'd rather invest in a 16-year-old than a 60-year-old. And I'm over 60. So shout out to Coca-Cola, by the way, who's an industry leader, has created our organization's Green Track in identifying, preparing, and connecting top young Latino environmentalists to maximize their impact. So how can we help Green Latino all this stuff is easy, man. We already have the infrastructure. We already have access to tens of thousands of young people that are between 15 and 40, and we have their bios and the ones that are interested in the Green Track. This is pretty simple that they can just be part of your group. And then you can then foment their advancements in the industry and capture their ideas more than anything. I mean, we're about to gather a group of young Latino conservationists and environmentalists and ask them in front of experts for their opinion on where the industry needs to go. And I would love to do that with Green Latinos. So I just want to figure out how we can support you because I admire you. And that creates an opportunity to create mentoring. And these advocates are going to have a better direction in terms of how to have the greatest impact. So let me make that offer to you. But tell me the importance of that pipeline and having younger Olgas and Marks out there tirando golpes for our community.
Well, number one, I'm going to say this is the power of convening, whether it's convening a massive group in person or convening virtually. Right now, we're utilizing this moment to find our unique resources, power, privilege, access, information, and saying, okay, Green Latinos is primarily professionals. We're not strong in the student level. You guys are. What's the optimal way to come together? So I am committing to you that I want to work with you to be able to create a system to be able to incorporate these students who desperately are leading to be able to make sure that they're part of our organization. And whether that's a fellowship or an internship or a paid internship or some other process, by making sure they have the opportunities to become these leaders. That is not just they don't hit a glass wall once they invest in their own education and then there's no opportunities for them. That's horrible. So, Antonio, I'm shaking your hand virtually.
My
We're
man.
doing this.
And look, wait till you see these bios. They'll knock you out because as much as you think they're students, they are innovators, they're visionaries, and they're already having an impact. And they're leveraging resources that, no offense, but our generation needs to figure out how to use better.
I just spoke last week at Yale, and those students, and it's not just Yale, it's everywhere. These students really have pretty amazing ideas on how to utilize, like you said, the current day resources, social media, the power that they have. You know, Antonio, we used to try to convince those with power to be able to do things for us. They don't wait. They don't wait. The dreamers, they didn't wait for the big Latino groups to lead on dream. They said, we're doing it ourselves. You know, and you see it over and over again. We have the access, we have the power, we're going to do it. And so being able to work with them so you have elder wisdom with the young wisdom.
That's it.
Is key to be able to succeed. So I'm excited about this opportunity.
Done. Wait till you see how. I think everything's easy anyway. I think there's a whole lot of people in DC that try to make things look harder so their value increases. I think everything's easy. All right, so that's done. I can't wait to talk to you after this. But let's talk about you when you were younger and what chispa inspired you to care so much about the environment and this work. Did it start when you were really young, or it was after you were involved in public policy and saw the impact you could have from that level of social change?
It was a little bit of both. When I was young, I lived in LA in the 70s. And LA in the 70s and 80s was smog central. And
that's right. I remember those pictures before it.
We'd wake up in the morning and you'd get your news report, but you'd also get the report on the air quality index.
Yeah.
And they would say things like, today is not a safe day for young children and the elderly to be outside. Can you believe hearing in the morning with, it's going to be 72 degrees, it's going to be a beautiful day, but it's not safe for you to be outside and exerting yourself. Of course we wouldn't listen. What child's going to listen to that? So we'd be outside and playing, but we knew which children had asthma.
Yeah.
We knew the signs of that difficulty breathing to take an asthma break, inhaler break.
Yeah.
We knew the closest house to run them to if it got to be urgent. We were facing as children life or death situations.
Yeah, man.
Because we lived within a mile of the 405 freeway, the 605 freeway, and the 22 freeway. We were encircled by this, along with oil and gas rigs, and we did not live in a bad neighborhood. We did not have the multitudes of other issues that accelerated and make it even worse than it was for us. But for me, it was like seeing that. Unfortunately, it just was how things were. I didn't even know that we should expect more, that this is not a good way to live. My dad was another influence. He would take us, because this, when you don't fly a family of 4 anywhere for vacation, you can't afford to. So you go camping.
Yeah.
Not everyone.
That's right.
But we did. And my dad, he invested in the camping, the tents. And California is a mecca for national parks, state parks, state beaches, beach camping. It's just, invest in the time and you can see Yosemite. You could see Joshua Tree. You can see Anza Borrego. You can see the most amazing things about our nature. And my dad he knew, he appreciated, he loved us, he exposed it to us. So that was in me. And so what finally really triggered it was having my first child. My first child, Solo Olivia. And we rushed her she was born in DC, and at 3 weeks we rushed her to California to see my mother, who was in the hospital, because my mother was in late-stage leukemia. And this was a leukemia that was most closely associated with benzene pollutants, benzene poisoning, which is in our industrial complexes. And so we rushed her over there. My mother held her and blessed her and said, I'll always watch over you. I'll always take care of you. And she passed a couple days later, but it was a miracle that she got to see her only grandchild at that time. And so for me, it was the moment where I said, I have to do this full time. I have to drop everything else and do this full time. That was the moment. And so on behalf of the biggest issue that is going to affect my children's life and my mother's life, this is my dedication to this issue.
I totally get why you're so passionate about this work. When it's a tribute to your mom, it's a legacy, and to your ancestors, and of course, forward to your and Olga's child. So when you talk about, benzene and asbestos and asthma and all these jobs that we have to take that expose us to the detrimental side of environmental pollutants and environmental degradation, they sometimes are very direct and other times more duplicitous, like you were talking about, where it's indirect or almost invisible, the impact that they can have on our community. Can you talk about the importance of Latinos not just being part of the movement, but leading the movement as you have?
You know as well as I do that when push comes to shove, that generally the Latino community doesn't ask for benefits any greater than what anyone else is getting. We're not out there in the front lines asking for tax breaks, asking for more vacation time. When our backs are against the wall, when we're getting effed with on immigration, when we're being told that if we associate or support any undocumented immigrants, it could become a felony, then it's like, ay, hasta, let's go. Let's hit the streets. The marches weren't about getting better services, or it was because they were threatening us. And so for our community, they know when our community is targeted, when that industry, when that recycling plant, when that oil and gas industry is being put in our neighborhood and not in the neighborhood on the other side of the tracks, and that's going to affect the children's health, that's when the comadres come out and are like, no, basta. You've done it too much to us. And so the leaders are already there, Antonio, in every community where we are getting disproportionately affected by environmental degradation, by racist plans to put industries in our backyards. There are leaders already there fighting it. They're just not resourced. They're not on the front pages of the New York Times. They're not on the front pages of the LA Times or the Washington Post. So our community is filled with these leaders, and they're brave, and they're relentless, and they're suffering. It's hard. But if we show them support and show them resources and show them that they're not doing this alone, then that fight, that leadership that they have comes out even tenfold. And so that's what we want. We don't want, it's not Green Latinos going into a community and saying, all right, we're going to run this show. We know what your needs are. We're taking over. It's Green Latinos going in and saying, okay, who's leading this? What resources do you need? How can we support you? You tell us. Because the leaders are already there, Antonio.
Yeah, I love that you just said that. I've said that for many years. When people say, what are your plans for the next 5 years? And I said, ask the Latino community. We follow the Latino community. It's not the other way around. And that's what you're talking about doing with these local leaders that are in place. We just need to support their leadership. And that's a different form of leadership. Leadership is servitude. And this is who we serve. And leading leaders is nirvana in terms of making social change. And that's what you're doing, and that's what you just described. Um, you mentioned immigration earlier, migration patterns and everything. You know how personally I've been involved in the migrant situation, as others have seemed to desert it or turned it into a political strategy. Can you please share your insights on how climate change is affecting these migration patterns in Latin America that impact our borders and communities? And a second part to it, so remember that part. What can Latin America do to address climate change, water conservation, land erosion, pollution, and other major issues that are impacting all of us daily? Allá y aquí.
I mean, you see the migration patterns, many of which are coming from this dry corridor in Honduras, in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, and how we are really trying to figure out in Guatemala también, in Honduras, and how we're trying to figure out, and you see the vice president talk about this, is how we can invest in those communities so that people don't have to face the deadly decision to travel thousands of miles with their children on their backs, not looking for a better life, looking to survive.
Yeah.
It's not a choice of how can I make more money. It's saying I can no longer grow beans, corn, coffee. It doesn't work anymore. The plants that my grandparents, my great-grandparents grew here to just as a subsistence farmer, I can no longer do. And there's no jobs for me. There's no opportunity here. And so they strap their children on their backs and they travel thousands of miles. And then when they get here, they get treated like invaders. And I don't know how the humanity can put up with that. But this is clearly an example of how you really need to look at it from a humanitarian lens, and how we can expend a small part of our foreign aid, of our defense budget, of any of these humongous budgets, just to say, okay, we can invest in these communities so that we don't have to face this on our borders, because they don't want to leave. They want to live where they live.
Yeah.
No one's like, I want to travel 3,000 miles in the most dangerous parts of the world so I can live in America. I want to live where I live. Let's let them do that.
Yeah, that humanitarian argument hasn't worked very well, unfortunately. And it's worse than ever. And I've been working on this issue with Sister Norma Pimentel and a lot of other folks for many, many years. And I've taken a lot of delegations down there. And it's worse than ever in terms of the rhetoric. And everybody's joining in on it because it's somehow, like I said, a political strategy. And these aren't human beings anymore. But we have to continue to highlight that change that narrative and highlight our journeys that came before. What I'm amazed are the amount of Latinos that are trying to shut that door behind them after their same journey. That is absolutely remarkable to me. But we'll keep at it, because these are important members of our community, and the most vulnerable, and the ones that should be cherished and supported the most as well. So I'm going to get to Earth Day, which we're celebrating this month, and why we have you on. So it needs to be more than one day simply as an observation. What action can we take individually and collectively year round in terms of maybe Earth Day is the catalyst for it, but what can we do year round? And how can we support GreenLatinos in the work that you're doing and be a part of it too? How can I be a part of it? Can I join?
You can join right now, greenlatinos.org. Join button, big button, and support the work that we do. And, find who's doing the work in your communities. Google it. But greenlatinos.org, our membership is available. If you don't have any money, you can join for free. We do not want to limit. If you do have some money, you can pay a certain amount. If you have a little more money and are not worried about your daily costs, you can pay a little more. Pay what you can, but join. The biggest issue is being part of the movement, being part of the mission, and being able to utilize the knowledge of our other members, being able to participate with others within community, within the state, federally. This is going to take us treating this like the documentary moment it is. We grew up watching film of the farm worker movement, of civil rights movement, of the women's right to vote, the end of slavery, and saying, okay, what would I have done if I had been alive? Would I have been on the bridge? Would I have been at the lunch counter? Would I have taken that bus? Would I have gone on a hunger strike? Would I have faced the dogs? You don't have to ask yourself that question anymore. We're in that moment. Are we going to do those things that it takes so that our children and their children, when they watch these documentaries of this moment we're in right now, can look at us and say, what did you do? What did you do when you had the chance? And we need to be able to look them in the eye and say, mija, mijo, I was there. And you were on my back. You were on my shoulders. And we fought together, and now you're a warrior. And you know, we need to make our parents and our grandparents proud that they taught us how to sacrifice, how to invest, how to make the right choices, so that we're part of that documentary, Tony. And that's going to be vital. Be part of that documentary. Make your children proud. Make your parents and your grandparents proud. And know that this is an existential moment. This is not just, it's a passing fade. What we do right now will determine the next 50 years of what life is going to be like for the next generations. And so make that investment.
Bravo, Mark Magaña. You know that this podcast is called Fritanga, and our goal is to not only bring information, inspiration, perspective, connection, and action, which you brought strong to our listeners, sin frenos, but also to create a space to help them find comfort and community through our culture. And look, nature, music, food, dance, literature, art, they all provide a cura to what ails us. And it's interesting when you look at our lack of health access to healthcare, to insurance, just being aware that we need to get to a mindful space, to a wellness space. What we have available to us is nature and some of these cultural resources that we have. So I'm going to ask you, what part of nature brings you comfort? And then what music? Was it a song your abuelita used to sing, or something that you and Olga used to dance to when you were first dating? Or is it what kind of food brings you comfort when you smell it cooking, or even what smells that bring you comfort? So let's start with nature, since it's you.
Nature, I live in the mountains. I live in Boulder, Colorado now, and I am fortunate to be able to look at the mountains every day and walk in them and be healed by them. Listen to the river. And all that's amazing. But Antonio, my spot's the beach.
You're so LA, man.
I
There needs to be a sign on your door letting everybody in Colorado know. Don't let them fool you.
I grew up going to the beach almost every day. I got engaged to be married at the end of the pier at my beach, Seal Beach, California. I listen to beach sounds when I need to decompress. I listen to the birds and the waves, and that's my spot.
All right, now music.
And the music is music of the revolutionaries, of those that are oppressed, that fight back, that at their lowest moments have the music to inspire others to do greater deeds. You talked about urgent activism. Sorry, what was the word?
Impatient activism.
Impatient activism. But our activism, and you referred to this as well, is not, our best activism is not angry activism.
Mm-mm.
Our activism is love and joy and food and music. When in Puerto Rico, when the governor screwed with the community went out day after day after day after day after day after day for almost 2 weeks, every day, filling the streets. And they didn't fill the streets because it was full of hate and anger. They filled it because Bad Bunny was out there, because the music, the dancing, the food. It's like
Residente, Ricky Martin, all past Hispanic Heritage awardees. Shout out.
Every day. The question wasn't, what are you doing tonight? The question was, where are you going to be? I'll see you out there. I'll see you out there 2 weeks straight. When you have 1 million people for 2 weeks straight hitting the streets, using joy, love, family, music, food, it's over. They have the power to make that change. And so to be able to learn that, to be able to encompass it, to make the change we need is what we're about,
right.
Is what you're about. And you mentioned all those things. And so that's the music, that's the food, that's the joy, that the love, that it's not angry. It's all those things. It's the hope for the future. It's the hopefulness in the movement that drives us night after night to be able to do that.
And that's what comforts you, Mark, and you comfort me, knowing that you're leading us in this space of protecting our earth and protecting ourselves and protecting generations to come. Thank you, Mark Magaña from Green Latinos. Join Green Latino, everyone. I'm going to right after this is over. Love you, Mark. Appreciate you. And thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for your leadership. And thanks for this podcast and this opportunity to talk on this amazing Earth Day. Utilize this Earth Day to instigate your future movement, your future activation. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.